How do you trick an NES into giving you a digital video signal? This video is about one part of an RGB mod for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It is entirely based on a video by Matt Casey that came out like 7 hours ago at the time of me recording this. I literally just watched the video and got excited and came here to record my own video. So if you want much more context and much more information, you should definitely watch that video. I'm going to link up here in the description and probably in a pinned post. What I'm contributing is excitement because I find this really cool and I wanted to tell you about it. So the NES was a console. Hopefully you know this. The way it output its graphics was over an analog connection to the television. It doesn't have the best image quality. And with a lot of these old consoles, one thing people like to do is add what's called an RGB mod. I don't really know much about these type of systems because I've really tried to avoid getting into the TV-based retro technology. I really do not need another hole to get into, and I do not have space for CRTs. My understanding is it gives you basically a digital signal. You can use this to produce much nicer images on a TV. The NES does not have the ability to do that natively. There is no digital color information coming out of the pixel processing unit, which is the chip in the NES that produces the image for the TV. So just not having a digital signal is kind of the first roadblock in producing an RGB mod. Again, you should check out Matt Casey's video for kind of more background about how we got here. But someone figured out a way to find that digital information. And the way they did that is the PPU chip has output pins that were never used in any real hardware. For all the pixels that are going to be displayed, it outputs a 3-bit, I think. I'll have to check that signal. Now that leads us to the second roadblock. The signal being sent out on those pins is not color data. It's, from what I understand, an index into the palette that the PPU is using. So you need a way of turning that palette index back into an RGB value. So the first kind of trick, I guess, or bit of cleverness to do this is to have a FPGA sitting between the NES's CPU and the PPU. And it's watching what's going on, and it's watching all the information going from the CPU into the PPU. In particular, it's watching for information about the palette whenever the CPU sets different values for the palette into the PPU. That way, it can keep track of those settings and know what the actual color values were mapped to a particular palette index. And this leads us to the third roadblock. Watching this, I think I didn't explain things super good. So the PPU is rendering a pixel. All that means is it's trying to figure out what color to send out to the TV. A pixel belongs to a tile, but the tile doesn't say what color the pixel should be. It says what entry in a palette of 4 colors should be used. The pixel's value is an index into the palette. Those 4 colors in the palette can be configured, changing the pixel's color without changing the pixel's value. Now, there are actually 4 palettes, and the tile says which palette all of its pixels should use. This all means that a pixel's color consists of 2 bits to pick which of the 4 palettes should be used, and 2 bits to pick which color in that palette should be used. These are the 4 bits that come out of those pins the FPGA has been using. The FPGA also has a copy of those 4 palettes because it's been watching to see when the palettes are changed. Okay, cool. Now the problem is there's another layer. A tile could belong to the background or it could belong to a sprite. And there's 2 sets of 4 palettes, one for background tiles and one for sprites. So to actually know what color to use for a pixel, you need 5 bytes of information. 2 bits for the pixel's value, the index into the 4-color palette, 2 bits for which of the 4 palettes the pixel's tile says to use, and 1 bit to say if the tile is coming from the background or a sprite. We only have those 4 wires though, so that only gives us 4 bits. How can the FPGA know if it should use the background palettes or the sprite palettes? The PPU knows. It's the one with all the logic to decide if a pixel is a background pixel or a sprite pixel. We just need a way to trick it into telling us which is which. Up to this point, the FPGA has been passively observing palette updates. It gets the update, it takes note, and it sends the update to the PPU. What we'll do instead, when the NES boots up, the FPGA will send a special, very boring set of palettes to the PPU. It will set all the background palette entries to black, and all the sprite palette entries to white. And whenever the FPGA sees other palette updates, it still takes note, but it doesn't send the update to the PPU. So the PPU keeps those black and white palettes the entire time. This totally trashes the video output and would make games unplayable. We already thought the video output was trash anyway. That's why we want an RGB output. But what we've done is change the video output to be a very crude depth map, a 1-bit depth map, telling us if a pixel is background or sprite. That's the 5th bit. The FPGA just needs to interpret the black and white video signal to get it. Then it can use the other 4 bits it already had to decide what color the pixel should be. Isn't that cool? When I saw that in Matt Casey's video, it just made me really excited and really happy. And I wanted to share that with you, I guess. Hopefully, that was interesting to you. If it was, and you haven't already seen Matt Casey's video, I definitely recommend that you check it out. And hopefully you can all get excited about cool technical details that you come across from your day. Bye.